when the gun went off. His attorney argues it is not his fault. The gun had a live bullet in it. Prosecutors say Baldwin was reckless on the set and he broke the cardinal rules of gun safety. Joining us now, trial attorney and legal analyst Richard Schoenstein. Thank you. Welcome to you. So the defense seems to be backing off on that "I didn't pull the trigger" claim. Is that a strong legal argument? What is your take so far?
Well, I totally agree with you. They're backing off on it because what they said in opening argument is not that Alec Baldwin said he didn't pull the trigger, but he said he didn't intentionally pull the trigger. Now, I question if that's what he actually said at the time, but I did sense the defense was backing off of that and maybe seeming to accept the inevitable, which is proof here that the gun couldn't have been fired without the trigger being pulled.
How big of a win is it that the judge decided he's an actor, he's not to be considered a producer, someone with a larger role on the film, ultimately with more responsibility over safety?
I think that was a big win for the defense because it gets rid of a whole bunch of stuff that the prosecution really wanted to look at about the budget being cut, about safety on the set in general. And it leads into the argument that Baldwin's lawyers made on opening statement. He was an actor acting. And all the other stuff was supposed to be done by other people. Most importantly, the gun was supposed to be loaded and checked by at least two other people, making it not his fault. So taking that producer stuff out of the case is extremely helpful to the defense.
If you're his attorney, do you encourage him to take the stand? Could he benefit from that, given his celebrity, given his adamant thoughts that he didn't do anything wrong here?
Yeah, see, this is a great question and one that really interests me in the case. Will he take the stand? Ordinarily, you don't think about putting the defendant on the stand. But here, I would think the jury deep down would want to hear from him. I would think he wants to tell his story to the jury, and maybe he wants to tell his story to the whole world, and he has to try to iron out the past statements he made, some of which seem to be factually inaccurate about whether or not he pulled the trigger. So all of that stuff might force him to testify. But if I'm his lawyers, what I'm going to do is practice and see how he does and then make the decision.
How about the prosecutor's claim that he failed the cardinal rule? You don't point a gun, real or fake, at anyone, no matter if it's loaded with real rounds or fakes.
Right. I think that's a good argument, especially when you consider they're in New Mexico, right, where gun ownership is ubiquitous and people are very serious about their firearms and they're very serious about gun safety in that state. And the prosecution is targeting that, saying to the people on that jury, you know what the rules are with a weapon. You don't point it at a person. You don't put your finger on the trigger unless you're meaning to shoot. And that's what they're going at. And the defense is making a point, a reasonable point, I think, that those rules don't apply on a movie set.
What about the witnesses? Who do you think will be called and why?
Well, I gathered, I saw this morning that the armorer herself may be testifying tomorrow. That, of course, is a very interesting witness because she's already been found responsible, so she's going to have to testify. We've started off with a lot of law enforcement people, which is not really a thunderous way to start the prosecution, I don't think. This is an interesting case because the defense is conceding that the victim was shot and killed, that the bullet caused it, and they're trying to downplay all that stuff you would ordinarily put at the front of a murder case about how the terrible tragedy and the victim and what happened to her. And the defense did a good job trying to steer the facts away from that. I assume we're going to hear from people who worked on the movie set, who are going to talk about Alec Baldwin's handling of the gun. So we may hear from the director. We may hear from other people who worked on the set. I think people who are working on that film are going to be the most important witnesses.
And might we hear from the victim's family, the husband of Helena Hutchins? Would there be any purpose for him to be involved in the court proceedings?
Yeah, and so the way the defense is pitching the case, there's really not a great purpose for it because we know that she died and she died by a gunshot wound. That is not at all the issue in dispute. And if I was the defense, I would object to any effort to embellish that or engender sympathy in the jury or to get them enraged. I would object to all of that, but I wouldn't be surprised if the prosecution tries to do it. This is a murder case, and the victim should always be paramount in our thoughts.
Richard Schoenstein, thank you for your insight. Appreciate it.
Good to be here.